Let's begin with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. God of our journey, we thank you for the gifts of this day. We thank you for the gifts of this Easter season, when we celebrate the Lord's resurrection and the power it has in our own lives. We thank you for giving us the call to follow you, and thank you for giving us the courage to follow that call. As we try to grow as disciples, help us to do so by being more attentive to who you are, by learning from you, and that by learning from you we can grow and share your life with all those we meet. We thank you for the gift of David and his ministry to so many different people. We just ask your blessing upon him as he presents these 3 days of mission to help us to know you better, to love you better, and to follow you more closely. And we make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Just real quick, those who have been out to LA Congress and have heard David speak, would you stand just so we can see how many of us have been out there with us? So wonderful. So he just kind of wanted to know how many people have maybe heard me already. And David and I had dinner this afternoon, and we were talking, and it was his first experience at Cracker Barrel. So we were talking, and he said, when you go out to LA, who are some of the people that you want to hear the most? And so I went through a litany of people that I like listening to out there, and he shared with me some of the people that he likes listening to out there. But anybody who's gone to LA with me will know that I tell them all the time, the one speaker I don't want you to miss is David Wells. And so I've met him about 3 or 4 years ago in an effort to try to get him to come to our parish, and began corresponding and trying to figure out a way to do that. And finally, we were able to, I think we booked this about 1.5 years ago, we were able to get him on the calendar for this trip. Our Spiritual Life Commission is committed to providing good programming for our parishes to help us, our parish to help us grow in our faith. We have another program coming up in October. The Mother of Mercy Missionaries will be here to present a presentation around the Feast of St. John Paul II. I don't have the exact dates in my head, but that's coming up there in the fall as well, so you can begin looking into that as well. My own, when I first heard David speak, and they always introduced him, they would always say he has a wife, 3 children, and a badly behaved dog. And I echo that because I have a badly behaved dog as well. But now it also says that he spends time on the Exay estuary pretending he understands the sea. So the only introduction I can do is what I said. When I go out to LA, I never miss listening to David Wells.
Well, I just need to check first that you can hear me. So can I just check that we're okay at the back? Is that audible? Yes. It is, okay. Thank you, Father. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming this evening. You know, the moment I got off the plane at Louisville, I don't know why you need all the other letters. See, we arrive from other countries and we read it how it's spelt. The moment Dinah met me yesterday, I've been treated very well. And I just want to say that I have the privilege of working all over the world, not all of the time, but very often. And my experience of American culture is that it's always generous. You're a generous people. You go to different countries and they all have charism. There's goodness all over the world, you know. But what Americans give is generosity. I don't know whether you know that. You're warm. Now, I don't know whether you'll still be warm at the end of this evening, but you are gracious people, and I just want to say it's my privilege to be here, and thank you for making it so. We've got 3 parts to this, and we're really hoping that you can make the 3. We understand that life isn't that simple. But tonight we're going to take up this theme of what it means to wake up spiritually. And I hope you'll enjoy it. When I was putting these slides together, I wasn't thinking, we need to be very serious. In fact, quite the opposite. So I want to begin by introducing my family to you, because they are going to speak to you as well. I can't give a talk without them. They're my life. That's my vocation right there. That's my calling. And when I look at them like that, I feel just a little bit homesick. Now, Alison is at the back there. She's mum to these 3 gorgeous children. Sam in the white T-shirt, Matthew in the black T-shirt, and Emily sitting on the top of us there. And of course, it's very tempting when you see a picture like that. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, what a lovely family." Oh, isn't that lovely? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, we hate each other. You see, the thing is, you go to these photo shoots and everything looks so perfect. It also looks so perfect. And I was sharing at Anaheim this year, actually, a couple of years ago. I had the privilege of being at a lectern in front of the arena there. For those of you who've been, you'll know that that arena basically has a capacity of 10,000. The first time I went to that event, they said to me, "Would you do 2 seminars?" So I put some handouts together and turned up with 50 handouts. And in my first seminar, there was over 1,000 people. And I said, "Where I come from, we call this a city." And so I was used to 20 people. And then you get into this arena, the huge arena, and you've got spotlights on you, and you can't see anyone. And I'm standing at the lectern, I have my phone on, and for the first time in my life, I was live streamed. Now, in the world of technology, that basically means you can be watched live all over the world. So I'm giving a talk in Anaheim, California, to an arena, and during the course of the talk, a text pops up on my phone from my son, Sam, and it just said, "Dad, we're watching you." And then it added, "You're an idiot." Now, if I may say to you, there's a reason that story is important, and I hope you understand it when I say it to you. Sometimes you get speakers, and very often, God willing, they're blessed. But actually, I want you to know something about me that's very important, and it will help us if we're going to work together. And it is this. I hope you understand this. If my wife was here tonight, sitting on the front row, she wouldn't be looking at me admiringly. Understand? It's important you understand that I see myself through their eyes. I'm not holier than you. Neither am I cleverer than you. I'll tell you my only qualification. My qualification for being here tonight is that I love this, and I'll keep doing it as long as he asks me. But that doesn't make me closer to God than you, and neither does it make me spectacular. My wife would look at me, and at the end of this evening, we would be going across the parking lot, and she would look at me with the way she does. And she would look at me and she would say, "When are you going to listen to your own talk?" The worst thing, a lady once made this mistake of saying to my wife, "Isn't he lovely?" You understand? Now, these things are important because actually very often we can imagine that somehow the people who are teaching us get it. I'm going to suggest to you 3 times, once each evening, the hardest lessons in life have to be learned over and over and over again. You don't learn them once. So I'm only going to tell you things. I hope this doesn't make you want to leave. I'm only going to tell you things you already know. How irritating is that? And you think, I don't know why I came then. So let's just take a little look at this. The most important thing I want to ask of you tonight is that you relax. And when I say relax, I mean, can you just put down all that stuff you're carrying about your worries, your busyness, the endless things that concern you? I know it sounds simple to say this, but for grace to be experienced, and I'm talking to myself as well, we almost need to put down all those things we brought with us. You know, the things that might have discouraged you from coming tonight. The things that say you're too busy, you've got a lot on. What about the children? What about the parents? What about the other things? You know, something we desperately need, almost, I'd like to say, to just put that down, just for about 3/4 of an hour. And then in that way, maybe God can reach into our hearts. The biggest problem about this, and I am talking to myself, is I can convince myself that I'm too busy to think. So, let's move on. In each of the 3 evenings, I'm going to try and touch one of the parts of your vision statement. Tonight we're going to try and have a little look at knowledge of love of the Scripture, a little basic Catholic teaching, and to see our lives as given to God's work. During the course of each 3 evenings, I want to try and touch each of those items on your mission statement. And the last thing I want to say as part of this introduction is, if you like what you're hearing, apart from the fact that it's being recorded, the last slide on Tuesday will have my email on it, and you just email me and I'll send you the slides. The only problem with that is it means you've got to come on Tuesday. So, basically, what I do for a living at the moment is that it's my job in my own diocese, the Diocese of Plymouth, to read the church documents, but not once, to keep reading them, and to read them over and over again. That doesn't make me holier than you, alright? It's my job. And as a consequence of reading these documents over and over again, you start to do something quite beautiful. It's not by your own merit. Is you start to see the threads that run through the documents, the things that the Church, and particularly this Holy Father, is saying often. So tonight, I'm only going to offer you 1 or 2 points, but they're crucial to his pontificate. What I'm going to show you tonight is what Pope Francis is calling of your community. But actually, just so that you don't feel too much under pressure, he's saying this to the world. So don't feel that this is about you personally, but you are going to hear what Pope Francis wants of us. And I'm saying that not by choosing my favourite parts of his documents, but by saying to you, what is he saying over and over again? And we'll have a little bit of Pope Benedict in there too, and a little bit of Pope John Paul II. Is that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, you don't really care, do you? So, strangely, I'm going to begin in Advent, and I know that seems an obscure thing to do in Eastertide, but what does the Church give us each year at the beginning of our liturgical year? It tends to give us the same message, depending on which Gospel, but you'll find that it's either watch or wake up. The first readings of the first Sunday of the Catholic liturgical year are pretty much, whoa, have you fallen asleep? Now what is that? And why would the Church make that its first measure? Because that's going to begin to look towards Easter and then beyond that to Pentecost. So what is this? What does it mean to wake up? What is that spiritually? Now you do know, don't you, that this is a metaphor. And in the Gospels you'll notice that quite regularly the disciples fall asleep. I don't know whether you've noticed that, but they have a habit of it. They do it in the Garden of Gethsemane. Now that's very unlikely. If I was to tell you that later this evening somebody here is going to be arrested, and possibly put to death, it's very unlikely that you'd fall asleep. It's a metaphor. It means don't miss the point. Forgive me for going right to basics here. For the Christian, the enemy of life is not death. For the Christian, the enemy of life is to fall asleep. It means to miss the point of your life. Alright? So for Christians who understand the resurrection of Jesus Christ, death loses its sting. I know that's easy to say, and some of you are grieving, but the reality is, for Christians, the danger is that you one day realise you're not alive. What is that? What does it look like, and what does it mean today? The best illustration I can do is to give you a story. Do you mind just a brief story to illustrate the point? So it goes a little bit like this. I'm going to do a little bit of role play drama now at no extra charge. So I'm in the supermarket. Do you call it supermarket in Louisville? So I'm in the supermarket in Louisville. And this is about, good grief now, it's about 18 years ago. That's not the picture of it, but just to illustrate the point. I'm in there, I'm pushing the cart. We're all right so far, we call it a trolley. You see, you think we speak the same language, don't you? Do you know, I've been stuck in hotels looking for the first floor. Where I come from, I think our first floor is your second floor. Did you know that? Honestly, it's bizarre. So there I am. I've got the trolley. Hanging onto the trolley is Sam, and Sam would be about 5-6 years old, and he's just hit adolescence early. So he's already got attitude. He's kind of walking around just doesn't really want to be there. And then sitting in the cart is Emily, and she's screaming because I won't give her a donut, whatever she smelt that she wants, and she'd be about 18 months old, so she's just like this little mouth on her neck. So she's screaming the entire place down. Other adults are looking at me as if, like, sort that child out. So, and she's spitting at me. Do you know that thing about people say babies are beautiful? They're not, are they? Anyway, so she's screaming at me. Sally's hanging on there, just irritated by life. And then somewhere, have we got any middle children here? Is anybody a middle son or daughter? Oh, we've got a few. They're all the deviants. The interesting thing about middle children, so Matthew, he's somewhere else in the supermarket and he's shoplifting. What we've got is a young man trying to be a good man, trying to be a good man, failing, really, being rescued by strangers. And somehow, my middle son is busy stealing things from the supermarket. He would go to the bleepers that set off the alarms. Yeah. He would walk through. Where I live, nothing ever happens. There's no news. I live in a tiny little rural community on the south coast of England. When he used to walk through those bleepers and they'd go off, the guy in the uniform would just say, "Oh, don't worry about that, he does that all the time." So that's because people are nicking things. Now here's the thing. I can't find one child. One child's screaming at me and the other is hanging on, he doesn't want to be there. And then this happens. And you will know this version of the story because the story will also have an experience in your life. So every now and again you get a prophet. And people don't ask for prophets. Alright? Prophets don't come invited. So a prophet walks into your life and is about to wake you up. You just don't expect it. And I get this elderly, frail, elegant gentleman. And he taps me on the shoulder and he comes out with these words. He says to me, pointing at my daughter who's crying, and he says to me, "Don't miss them growing up." Now, can you just imagine for a minute how pleased I was? Okay, now inside my head, this is all happening in seconds. Inside my head, I'm thinking, this little girl is teething. She was up at 12:30, 3:30, 5:30. At 7 a.m. this morning, I'm a mule with a donkey with a brick in my ear, trying to entertain her. And I look at him, and for a second I look at him and I think to myself, what makes you think I'm going to miss them growing up? And part of me feels angry. Don't walk into my life and give me advice. Actually, if I need anything, I need help, not advice. The world is full of advice. Don't give me advice. I didn't welcome him. I smiled, as you would do, courteously, and went about my world. So you have to understand, we drive up the freeway to a northern city, junction 23. We take the exit there and drive for about 6 miles. We come to a place called Loughborough University, and we find block 5, and we arrive there, Royce Hall, 2nd floor, room 9B, near the stairs. We go into the room, my wife and I, and we open his suitcase. And my wife begins to unpack for him. She places his toothbrush and toothpaste in a jar by the sink. And then we hear voices in the corridor, and we say to our son, "Sam, go and meet your new neighbours. Go and walk into your new life." And as he leaves the room, I catch my wife's eye, and the two of us look at each other, our flesh and blood, walking into his own life. And I detect a hint of sadness in her. And I said to her, intently, "Alison, I love you." And I always did. And she looked at me and she said, "Don't go there." Nobody told me that you could get told off for telling your wife you love her. As we left our son in that place, she wept. But as we drove away, the prophet in the supermarket came back to me, you see, and it turned out it wasn't advice he was giving me. In fact, I'll tell you what it was. It was a confession. And the confession went like this: "I see you with your kids in the supermarket, and something inside me aches because I miss them growing up." Is it possible, it's only a question, that you would know in your heart what matters and then fall asleep to it? It wouldn't make you a bad person, and it won't send you to hell, but it might put you to sleep. That's the premise of Christianity, and it goes like this. Every Advent you'll be greeted with the same message, and it goes something a little bit like this: are you falling asleep to what you were born for? It isn't condemnatory, it's healthy. And every now and again, and I'm talking to myself, I realise I've dozed off again. The most important lessons in life have to be learned over and over and over again. David Wells, says my wife, "When are you going to listen to your own talk?" You see? Now, here goes. There he is, meeting the sea for the first time. I didn't know that when you introduce a child to cold water, they contribute to the sin. And here he is with his gran, learning to be a hero. All he wants to be as a little boy is a firefighter. And here he is. You know, you go to these theme parks and they take these pictures and you don't buy them because they're expensive. But when I got this, I had to buy it. Ladies and gentlemen, look at this. Here's the weirdest thing, you know, in these worlds of mixed messages that we live in these days. Why isn't that child abuse? You know, you start to fall in love and your head gets messed up and you don't know who to trust, and you try and make your way and find your own manhood or womanhood, and then one day you're moving on. And for those of us of a shared age, it goes pretty quick, doesn't it? And so this message of wake up shouldn't be heard as an accusation. Neither should you feel bad if you recognise inside yourself that sometimes you fell asleep. One of the great healings of that is our sacrament of reconciliation. Sometimes I go to confession, you know, and I say, Father, I don't know even if there's a word for this sin, but I know that I've spent an awful lot of the energy of my life devoted to the wrong stuff. And every now and again I wake up and I realise I was asleep. So, give me absolution for my stupidity. Feels like a pretty good confession to me, and I need to make it often. And Pope Francis is going to do something fabulous. Do you know what he's doing? Built, incidentally, to be very clear, on the work of Pope Benedict, particularly in his first document, and we'll look at that in a minute. Do you know something? This Pope is asking the Church, don't take this the wrong way, he's not going to change the rules. What he's asking for is that we wake up. And tomorrow we'll have a little look at what his version of wake up is. But what he's asking us to do is to say, is it possible that every now and again, even as a community, as a body of Christ, as a church, that we can miss the point? It's not an accusation. It's a healthy penitential right. Okay, just bear with me. This is how he writes it, and you'll find a statement like this in each of his documents. He says things like this. Now, this is towards the beginning of Amoris Laetitia, and he says this. We need to be humble and realistic, acknowledging that at times the way we present our beliefs and treat other people has helped to contribute to today's problems. Now, here comes the sentence, and it's beautiful theology rooted in St. Augustine, and it goes like this. We need a healthy dose of self-criticism. Now, before you start going into, oh no, it's going to make me feel even worse now. It isn't like that. Now, notice St. Augustine's emphasis on sin. If we had another night, if we had 4 evenings, I would ask us to look at sin. It's one of my favourite subjects, and I'm very good at it. Here's the thing about sin. For Francis, and indeed for Augustine, it's best to look at sin as not so much I'm a terrible person. Rather, a healthier way of looking at sin is to look at it like this. It goes, I'm better than that. I'm better than that. Look at me doing the very things I don't mean to. Here am I again, falling asleep. Oh, what am I like? I'm better than that. So for Francis, sin is seen more like catching a cold. And what he's doing is he's saying to the church, is it possible that in our efforts to be faithful, we may sometimes have missed the point? Have missed the point of, for example, being church. And he's going to challenge us like that, not in a way that's going to make you feel bad, but ask yourself, oh, I wonder if we were meant to be better than this. Have you ever... Actually, do you know, one of the things I've really enjoyed today, it's lovely to see our people singing together, isn't it? But I've heard them singing separately today because I've been at all the masses. and it's lovely, but that kind of harmony is very precious. Now, what is really interesting to me is that Pope Francis is saying, you know, sometimes we become a bit sanguine. And, you know, the church can become a bit depressive. Did you know that? That sometimes we go to meetings and it's all kind of, oh, you know, the world's a terrible place, and young people today, and what are we going to do about? And after a while it begins to feel like a chore. Well, Francis is saying, you know something? We need a healthy dose of self-criticism. We were meant to be better than that. Here's a better way of looking at it. Just take a look at that slide for a minute. What Francis says is you need to, in order to be happy, you need a penitential life, Lord have mercy, and you need to understand a little bit about your self-deception. So there's me looking in a mirror. That's the point. So this is Francis's kind of reflection on what sin does. So I was looking at this picture with my wife, Alison, and she said to me that she didn't know many women, this is her words, not mine, she didn't know many women who look in a mirror and immediately like what they see. She said that perhaps this is more true of England than the United States, I don't know. But she said, you know, I look in a mirror, David, and I immediately go, oh. But we also had this conversation and we agreed that we didn't know many men who look in a mirror and don't like what they see. So here's me looking in a mirror. 55. Now I can deceive myself that I'm healthier, younger, more impressive. I don't mean I'm arrogant. I hope I'm not that. But what Francis does is what he's doing is he's holding up a mirror to the church, and this is not about changing our theology. He holds up a mirror and he says, do you know something? To wake up. Are we the church we could really be? Are we a people that God called us to be? And most importantly, and I think very excitingly in your communities, are we the witnesses that would make us happy? Okay? There's not a job coming, and you're not going to walk out of here in half an hour feeling worse. I promise you. But this healthy sense of self-deception is a good place to start. Perhaps the best way of saying it is, have we caught a cold? Now, what are the symptoms of the cold that Francis holds up to us? And in actual fact, if you look at Benedict's writing, you'll see it in his pontificate also. I'm going to give you two symptoms of the cold. I'm going to ask you if you recognise them, and then we'll have a brief conversation with the person next to us to say, do you recognise these? Is what David is saying true? So at that point, obviously, if you don't like the person sitting next to you, there'll be an opportunity to move. I'm keeping my eye on the time, by the way. It's midnight in my head. Okay. The two symptoms for Francis, if you read his documents over and over again, the first is paralysis, a fear of doing things wrong, and the second is remoteness, a fear of truly encountering one another. Now for Francis, he's saying, before we start worrying about building and planning, the first thing to do is to go, do you know something? Are we paralysed and are we remote? Now let's look at this briefly, because they're not going to make you feel bad. But let's look at them. Let's start with this word paralysis. Of course, he's not referring physically there. But look at his language. He uses statements like this in all four of his encyclicals. And it goes like this. A tomb psychology develops. A tomb psychology. And slowly transforms Christians, are you ready? into mummies in a museum. This is Francis writing about the church he loves. Disillusioned with reality, with the church and with themselves, they experience a constant temptation to cling to a faint melancholy, lacking in hope, which seizes the heart. Now, forgive me just for a second. Have you ever come across mummies in a museum? All right, if they're anything, they're stuck. They're not moving. Now, it's very tempting, this. I know you don't do this in your parish, but I've been to lots of parishes where people sit pretty much in the same pew every week. It's amazing! I know you're happy because the people all over England, right? They come to the same Mass every week. They don't even change Mass times. I know, imagine, that's what we like in England. Do you know, sometimes, I mean, we'd never say that's my pew. But we might stare at somebody who's sitting there. No, I mean, look, forgive me. I mean, if you're not sure about this, there's a little test of it, which is go to a parish church one weekend and without permission, move a statue. Honestly, you'll start a fight that goes all the way to Rome. People will write to the bishop, they'll say, we paid for that statue. Another group will say, but we like it like that. And other people will say, well, we like it like that. People will fall out with each other. It's amazing. And it doesn't make people bad, it's just that they're stuck. Herman Lombards, the Belgian philosopher, said, we become champions of the familiar. We like it just how it is. So don't you, David Wells, walk into our life and propose we open the windows. Alright, now I know you're not like this, but back home. How about this one? I know you wouldn't do this, but imagine this. So I go into a parish for a mission week, and I did what I had the privilege of doing today, which is I went to the masses, and at one of the masses, this was in a parish church in England, I'm in the narthex at the back, just standing there, and a lady who knows me comes up to me and welcomes me. She said, oh, welcome to the parish, thank you for coming. I said, that's fine. I was just looking in the church, mainly a very similar looking age group and an ethnicity. But sitting by the window on the left-hand side, about half the way up the chancel, was a big man, a very tight t-shirt, it was a hot summer's day, covered in tattoos and lots of studs in his face. And he didn't look like anyone else. He just looked different. And I said to her, who is the gentleman over there? And she said, I don't know, I've never seen him before. And I said, well, let's go over and say hello. And then she said, oh, you can't do that. And I said, why can't we do that? And she said, well, it's not our week on the rota. It's Jeff's week on welcome. Just ask you to do something for a second, and thank you, by the way. Welcome, actually, when it's understood as a greeting, is a very important ministry. But could you imagine what would happen to a parish if you put welcome on a rota? I just want you to think about it for a minute. What signal does that send to everybody else? No, it's not deliberate, it's not a bad thing. But supposing welcome becomes somebody's job, what happens to everyone else? Well, it might not be true in the States, but where I come from, you can be lucky sometimes to get a smile. So what happens is that we become stuck in a routine of procedure. It doesn't make us bad people. But, okay, the best illustration of this, Father's seen this before, is my 2 owls. I love this picture. So it goes a little bit like this. I call this owl here, same as it ever was owl. All right? Now, this is you when you begin a sentence with the words, in my day. In my day. You don't see it as if you're dead. Have you ever worked out when your day was? Suppose it turns out to be today, your day. You go, in my day. You know, it's an odd phrase. But what are you referring to when you say, when the summers were longer, there were no troubles, and all we did was climb trees. And you go, it was never like that. just forgotten what it was really like. Now, this one over here, I haven't got an adjective for this owl, I just call it cool. And cool owl is you too, when it dawns on you halfway through a story that the story is really about you. And Jesus taught like that, you know. It's why he taught in parables. So that what would happen is you'd listen to a story as though it was a child's story. A man had 2 sons. And you'd be going, oh, a man's got 2 sons. What were they like? Well, the youngest son was like this. But when it gets you, the story ceases to be a window into some other people's lives. And halfway through it becomes a mirror. And then the story has got you. And that's why they made plans to kill him. Because he knew the inside of them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a good story will always tilt your head. Because if it works, you'll go, oh, ouch. The man in the supermarket turned out to be me. See? Now, for Pope Francis, the risk is not atheism. You'll find he enjoys atheists. He'll talk to them all day. Neither is the risk Islam. You'll find he likes Muslims. He'll talk to them all day. For Francis, the risk to the church is stuckness. When we become champions of how we think things ought to be, and then we resist at all costs an open heart to the possibility of mission. And one day, we stand in churches waiting for the world to arrive, as if they're stupid. The second of the 2 symptoms, keeping my eye on the time, we've got about 20 minutes to go. The second of the 2 symptoms is remoteness. That if you become paralysed, 2 groups suffer. The first are the people you love, and the second will be the poor. The first are the people you love, and the second group that suffer will be the poor. We'll have a brief little look at that tomorrow. But look at this. He says, the great pragmatism of the daily life of the church, in which all is appearing to proceed normally, while in reality faith is wearing down and degenerating, into this phrase, and he uses this in 2 of his documents, small-mindedness. What's small-mindedness in this theology? Well, notice how he puts it. I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting and dirty because it's been out on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security. Do you see what he's doing there? He's saying, don't think small, think big. Don't think small, think big. Now, let's just go to customs for a minute. All right? I come through your border controls quite often. All right? Here's me thinking big. He's going to say to me this question, because when I come to this country, I have to declare that I'm working. I'm not here as a tourist. So I will say, he will say to me, what's the nature of your business while you're here in Louisville? Now, can I just say, what's the answer to that question? I'm going to give you a few answers. See which ones you prefer. The first answer is, well, I discovered quite early in my life that I'm loved by God, and that love was expressed in the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I've come to share that love with the people of this country. What's he going to say? I want you to hear this second answer. Well, I am a theologian, and I study the teachings of the Catholic Church, and I've come to talk about Pope Francis. Did you notice how that was just a little bit more respectable? And here's a third answer. Well, I'm an education advisor in England and Wales, and I've come to speak on the subject of theology. Now, I was able to do 3 very different things there, and you'll find that some of them are more acceptable than others. but they're less dangerous. Now here's the thing. What this Pope talks about when he says bruised, hurting and dirty is how real do you want to be? Because I can hide even behind the information I have. Small-minded doesn't make us bad people, it just shrinks us. And notice how he writes it. He's done it consistently through his pontificate. The church sometimes has locked itself up in small things and in small-minded rules. Now, don't misinterpret that as a liberal agenda. What he's actually saying is, be careful what you make important. Don't miss the point. Keep the big things the big things. You were born to love, actually. Now, I've been in parishes that will fall out with each other over where you put the Christmas tree at Christmas. And at the same time that people are drowning in the Mediterranean out of poverty and necessity. And what Francis is saying is, don't shrink your world. And he's talking to me, because I can do it even after giving this talk. Now, another way of putting it, this is Jeff, my secretary's husband. There he is, on holiday in Norway. And that's not the picture, that's an insert of the picture. I'm going to show you the whole picture now. Okay, here it comes. Now, if you haven't been to Norway, I'd encourage you to put it on your bucket list. Actually, if there's one thing America does fabulously, it's got to be nature. My goodness, landscape in this vast country of yours. But one of the things Norway has got that you haven't is that they haven't discovered health and safety. Now, I kind of like that. Notice the complete absence of a fence. And here's the thing. This is known famously as the Pulpit Rock. It's a Norwegian fjord. And there I am taking a picture. What I like about this picture, there's lots of things I like about this picture, but just go with it for a second. Please, I hope this helps to explain this principle. It goes a bit like this. On a bad day, I expand into my picture. On a bad day, ladies and gentlemen, I become the biggest thing in my life. On a bad day, it's all about me. On a bad day. On a bad day, it's about how I'm coming over, my reputation, my salary, my pension, my living conditions, what my life is about, how people treat me. On a bad day, it's all about me. That's something I've noticed. I expand, but my world shrinks. On a good day for Pope Francis, you're still precious. You've been won by the blood of Jesus. You're giving the picture its scale. But there's room for the world. And please don't be offended by this. There's room for change. On a bad day, I so inflate into my world that the only thing that matters is how seriously I'm being taken. And my ego takes over. And I can forget myself. On a good day, I realise that actually, as Mother Teresa once put it, your life isn't about you anyway, and by the way, it never was. What beautiful wisdom from that woman, blessed Mother Teresa. Your life isn't about you, and it never was. Gorgeous. Now here's the thing. When I live in that space, I'm actually, it's took me 55 years to learn this, I'm actually happier. I don't want the world to be about me anyway. I mean, you know, if the object of my life, ladies and gentlemen, was that they built statues for me, what kind of person would I become? If I came here expecting a crowd and couldn't work with 10 people, what kind of man would I be? That's why I need to look at myself through the eyes of my wife and my children, because they know I'm an idiot. Now watch for the patterns. I'm coming into land. Here goes the patterns in Mark's Gospel, but you could do this with any of them. Notice the disciples teaching us this principle of shrinkage. Watch this, it's gorgeous. You'll have seen it before. It's not new to you, but just have a little look at it. In the 9th chapter of Mark's Gospel, the disciples are arguing with each other over who's Jesus' favourite. Now that is important. Alright, these are the people who knew him and walked with him, and they are already insecure about who's in charge when he's not. Now, who takes over control when the leader goes? In the 10th chapter, the disciples are protecting Jesus from children, because if children have access to Jesus, what happens to all their PhDs? You know, I still find it fascinating that all over the world, Catholics don't really know what to do with children at Mass. Alright, we only need a child playing up this aisle, and half of you will go, oh, how lovely. And the other half will go, will somebody please control that child? So when I was a high school teacher, Father would be saying Mass, and this would be me over here. I was the deputy principal of the high school in Nottingham, and I'd be over here. Father would be here saying Mass, and I would be over here, and I'd be doing this at the young people. Are you ready? This is my job at Mass. Honestly, if anybody got my finger during Mass, they knew what it meant. They meant, you, after Mass, you're dead. Peace be with you. Do you understand the contradiction there? Don't misinterpret me. I'm not saying children come to Mass on roller skates. I'm not saying that. What I'm actually saying is, do you notice the contradiction? We don't know how to do it. Now here's the thing. In 10:28, Peter is stressing to Jesus all that he's given up to him, following him, hoping that this might be a qualification for deputy principal. So you see what's happening now is they're beginning to count the costs. Oh yes, but all that we've given up. Do you see, this shrinkage starts to take place. The disciples are great teachers. In 10:37, James and John want to sit nearest to Jesus in the kingdom. Why? Well, the scripture scholar Raymond Brown suggests the answer is they're brothers. If they sit either side of Jesus, what happens to Peter? Do you see what's happening? They're getting into groups and falling out with each other. What Tom Smales, the Scottish theologian, calls holy huddles of the like-minded. You notice when there's an issue in a parish, people will gather and have the honest meetings in the parking lot. It's not good for the church. If you want to know what Francis would ask of you every time there's a trouble, is go to people who are different to you and ask them what they think. That's where wisdom will come. Most people find allies. They go after people who already agree with them, and then they gather in small groups and determine the future. Now don't do that, folks, because it's the end of the church if you start doing that. The skill is to meet the person who thinks differently to you and engage. That's what Francis is doing. It's why he's speaking to people who are not Catholics so freely. Now here's the thing. In 1041, the others are annoyed with James and John for asking, privately hoping that they wouldn't be relegated themselves. Now what I'm trying to do here is to build up a picture of a group of insecure, vulnerable men who will become our saints, whose worlds are shrinking as they're walking with Jesus. They're not bad men. They'll be redeemed by him. But as we read, even in the readings at Easter time, they're not really getting it. As Shakespeare would always put a character in his plays so that we understand through the lens of the person who doesn't understand. What here we're doing is we're going, oh, we can be a bit like them, can't we? And here comes the sucker punch, and you barely notice it. It's in 1047. The people nearest to the blind man tell him not to bother the master. Why is that important? Within 5 chapters of Mark's Gospel, the disciples have lost the mission. In the opening chapters of Mark's Gospel, notice Mark does very little with the infancy narratives. In the opening chapters of Mark's Gospel, Mark gives us Jesus' mission very quickly. And it goes like this. Jesus says, not in exactly these words, we're going to have a mission. Before we go on the road together, I want you to remember this, that I have come to give sight to the blind. It's a metaphor. By chapter 10, the disciples are turning the blind away. Not because they're bad, not because they're stupid, but because they've become small-minded. Their discipleship is about their performance. Most people don't like the phrase disciple because they think they're not worthy of it. It's the beginning of small-mindedness. You are absolutely a disciple, and we saw 4 new disciples baptized today. And it was breathtakingly beautiful. And you go, there's another one. Another new disciple. How prepared do you think you've got to be? Like we seem to be waiting to be experts about something. Imagine arguing with each other over who's the best. I mean, we wouldn't fall for that, would we? And you know the strange thing is once you start doing this, you send yourself on a tricky road of working harder and harder and harder and harder to prove yourself. Now, here's the strangest thing. I know this is not true over here, but where I'm from, do you know, you go to a party socially and you say to people, how are you? Do you know the answer you'll most likely get in England? It'll go, well, I'm very busy. And you go, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And then they say, well, how are you? And you reply back, well, I'm very busy as well. And then you enter into a sort of bizarre conversation about who's busiest. Do you know, in England, we're terrified of not being busy. And we even think a healthy parish is a busy parish. It's the last thing people need, is more to do. Everywhere I go, I live in a culture that begins with this phrase, are you keeping busy? As if that's the point of our lives. I met a woman recently, she said, my husband's retiring this summer. I said, oh, you must be very pleased. She looked at me and she said, I am not. I said, why? She said, well, what am I going to do with him? Do you know what's interesting about that sentence, what am I going to do with him? She loves him, she's married him, she's lived with him all her life, but she doesn't know who he is without his job. Imagine waking up in a world in which the first thing you tell a stranger is what you do for a living. We're more evangelical about our work than our faith. We tell everybody what we do for a living and how busy we are. And if I said, who do you love? You go, excuse me, I'm English. You don't answer questions like that. Isn't this a great picture? 7 minutes to go. What I love about this picture is just, I think that most people in the culture I live in think their lives are like that. Sorry, it's a metaphor. What I love about the mule, this is me, by the way, is it stops struggling. Most metaphor for most people's lives goes something like this. When you're ready, somebody take a box off the car. Do you know where I'm from? The first question people ask you is, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Isn't there a better question to ask than what do you do? What do you do? After a while I got so tired of the question I used to say, well, sometimes when I'm on my own in the house, I dance naked. What do you do? I'm going to finish with this because I want to lead in a little bit to tomorrow. Tonight is about our human ache. You were born to love. You know that. Nobody ever put on somebody's gravestone, she met all her targets. Understand? But a Christian life was meant to live up to that. And David Wells falls asleep to the real purpose daily. If you want to know why you're a Christian, it's for the people out there who are not. When was the last time somebody walked into this building because you're a Catholic? Doesn't make you a bad person. Don't go on a guilt trip. It's not what this is about. The question is it possible that one day we think coming to Mass somehow pleases God and keeps him on side? As if he didn't die for us. And then one day we're in a kind of bargaining situation, imagining that we're doing okay as long as we keep coming. And meanwhile, for Francis is saying the world's hurting, and we're imagining it's okay just to show up. Doesn't make us bad people, but for Francis, the resolution of our hunger for happiness is mission. If the church loses its mission, he says, it effectively becomes ill. Self-composed, self-imposed, and inflated. And then we fall either out with each other over where to put the Christmas tree. So here goes. This is a fabulous piece of theology from Pope Benedict. And it goes like this. If in my life I fail completely to heed others, solely out of a desire to be devout to perform my religious duties, then my relationship with God will grow arid. It becomes merely proper but loveless. It becomes merely proper but loveless. This was in Pope Benedict's first document on love, a stunning treaty. I encourage those of you who like to read that document. In that document, this statement will begin to form Pope Francis's pontificate, and it goes a bit like this. What does proper but loveless look like? So, for those of you who are married, I just wonder if you could identify with this sentence. It goes a little bit like this. What is the thing you least want to hear your partner say? Alright? Now here's mine. I've heard it 5 times. I could give a whole day on this. I'm just going to do one and then we'll finish. And it goes like this. My wife, the kids at the time were about 6, 4 and 2. We were both trying to hold down jobs, big jobs. We were both tired and we're bathing the children. It's about 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening in February. And we're tired. And then she comes out with this sentence. I hate it. It goes, are you ready? Begins with my name, both syllables. That's in full. She goes, David. It's got a slight inflection on it. David, pause. The comma matters. David, comma. And she comes out with this sentence. It terrifies me. She says, we need to talk. And inside myself, I'm already going, are you ready? I'm thinking, do we? Can we not talk? Can we just watch sport? Can we drink beer and not talk? David, pause, we need to talk. The kids were 6, 4 and 2. And then she looked at me, we put the kids to bed, we had a brief reprieve before one of us fell asleep. And she looked at me and she said, you know something? She said to me, don't get too serious. I didn't marry a serious man. I married a man who made me laugh. And if you stop being him, what will become of us? Proper, but loveless. And don't get me wrong. We weren't about to fall out with each other. What she was really saying is, we can bring up 3 kids. We both value education. We both love them. And if we do well, they'll do well. But me and you, what will happen to us? We came to a simple resolution that we would go out for a meal once a month with 2 rules. Are you ready? Rule number 1. I wasn't allowed to invite my friends. And rule number 2 was much harder. Are you ready? For the entire evening, we were not allowed to discuss at any stage during the course of the evening our children. So I love this woman. She gave her life to me. But this phrase started, we need to talk, because I'd signed an anniversary card, David Wells. Look, sorry, there are some women here who are already angry with me. Look, do you know what she said to me? It was brilliant. Do you know what she said? She said, I know what your surname is. I took it. She's good. But here's the thing. Do you know what she really knew? And this was the ache of the human heart. She knew I'd signed it at work. And when you sign an anniversary card at work, it's on a list of jobs to do. And when an anniversary card is on a list of jobs to do, your marriage is over. Proper but loveless gets the job done. See? Proper but loveless. You could come in here and have excellent liturgy, organised prayer, almsgiving, fasting, everything just perfect. And you could do it all without love. It's possible. I'm just saying, it's possible. The second rule was we weren't allowed to discuss our children. And so I'm looking at her, the woman who gave her life to me, and I'm going, well, how are you? And with the wisdom that comes with love, she was able to look at me and go, that's right. Be him. Be the fool that I met on a dance floor, who made me feel that I was worth something, and tell me that he loved me and make me laugh. And Pope Francis is saying, I want a church that falls in love with the Lord, breathes life into life itself, and walks out there like it's told its face. Now, 2 questions for you. It's 10:2. I promised Father that we would finish at 10:2. So here's tonight's homework. You ready? This is for in the car on the way home. Right? If you're on your own, you can talk to yourself. It goes like this. 2 questions to prepare for before tomorrow night. Number 1, in what ways are we creatures of habit? In what ways are we creatures of habit? Doing things without thinking. It won't make you a bad person. It's not going to send you to hell. But in what ways has your routine become your life? It won't make you a bad person. But have you reached the point where you're doing things properly, but perhaps without the heart? And the second question is, when do you... Now, please enjoy the question. Don't get cross with yourself. It goes like this. When do you catch yourself, this is not an accusation, falling into proper but loveless? When do you catch yourself doing everything's right, for what T.S. Eliot said, you do everything right for the wrong reason? Alright? So 2 little questions there. Have a little bit of fun with them. And here's the clue. Don't take it too seriously. One of the skills with Pope Francis's reflection on sin is to do it like this. Lord, I'm a stupid man, being stupid again, and I know I can be better than this. Now, if you felt any ache inside yourself tonight, It's one of the reasons we wanted to offer the sacrament of reconciliation just afterwards now. For anybody, now please just enjoy the opportunity. Sometimes go to confession and say, Father, I haven't got a list. I just know that he said something tonight, and part of me hurts a little bit, because I think perhaps sometimes I fell asleep. And sorry, I do this all the time. I give these talks and fall asleep tomorrow. So part of the skill is just to go to confession sometimes and say, I'm here again. I've been stupid and I can't even tell you why. And the priest will understand that and offer you absolution. So just be mindful that that is an opportunity the Church in its wisdom gives us tonight and in the future, if it's something you need. And so let's finish there tonight. Please come back tomorrow and we'll cheer up a bit.